The cargo freighter Horizon's Edge drifted through the black emptiness between star systems, its hull scarred from years of hauling mining equipment across the outer colonies. Raina Cole checked the navigation charts for the third time that hour, her fingers drumming against the worn control panel. 3 more days until they reached the delivery point. 3 more days of absolute boredom. "We're burning money flying this slow," Dmitry Volkov muttered from the engineering station. The grizzled mechanic wiped grease from his hands onto his already filthy coveralls. "I could squeeze another 2% from the engines if you'd let me. And then we'd arrive with melted reactor coils," Raina replied without looking up. "I'm not explaining that to the company again." Yuki Tanaka sat at the communications desk, her headphones pressed tight against her ears. She had been listening to the same boring automated beacon signals for 6 hours straight. Colony traffic reports, weather updates, trading posts advertising their prices, the usual noise that filled the space lanes. Then something changed. Yuki's hand shot up and she yanked the headphones off. Her face had gone pale. "Captain, I'm picking up something strange." Raina swiveled her chair around. "Strange how?" "It's a distress signal, but not in any language I recognize." Yuki's fingers flew across her console, pulling up wave patterns and frequency analyses. "The structure is definitely communication, definitely urgent, but the syntax is completely alien." Hassan appeared in the doorway, his security uniform perfectly pressed despite the casual nature of their cargo run. "Old military habits died hard." "How far out?" 15 light hours. In the Crimson Nebula. Yuki pulled up the star chart, and a red cloud of gas and debris filled the main screen. Radiation warnings flashed around its borders. Dmitry whistled low. "Nobody goes in there. That nebula will cook your electronics and melt your hull plating. Galactic protocols say we have to investigate distress calls," Hassan said quietly. His hand rested on his belt, where he used to carry a weapon back in his military days. Raina studied the nebula on screen. Red and orange gases swirled in violent patterns lit from within by dying stars. Navigation hazards marked every sector. Insurance companies refused to cover ships that entered it. Smart captains avoided it completely. "Play the signal," she ordered. Yuki tapped her console and the bridge filled with sound. It was definitely a voice, or maybe several voices. The words rose and fell in patterns that sounded like panic. Underneath the voices, alarms wailed in a rhythm that transcended language. Anyone who had ever heard a ship dying would recognize those sounds. "Can you translate any of it?" Raina asked. Yuki shook her head, but her fingers kept working. "Give me time. The computer is analyzing the patterns. But Captain, even without translation, I can tell you what this is. This is someone dying. This is someone begging for help." The bridge fell silent except for the endless loop of the alien distress call. Raina stared at the nebula, doing the math in her head. They were a cargo ship, not a rescue vessel. They had no weapons, minimal shields, and a crew of exactly 7 people. The company would be furious if they diverted from their delivery route. The insurance wouldn't cover damage from entering a hazard zone, and there was a very real chance they'd die in that radioactive soup. "How long would it take us to reach them?" she finally asked. Dmitry pulled up the calculations. 8 hours if we push the engines.
"Maybe 7 if I ignore every safety protocol ever written." "Which you love doing," Raina said. "It's what you pay me for." Dmitry grinned, but his eyes were serious.
"Captain, I need to be clear. That nebula will damage us. Best case scenario, we spend weeks in dock getting repairs. Worst case, we don't come back out." Hassan crossed his arms. "International law requires us to respond to distress signals." "Galactic law," Yuki corrected quietly. "We signed the accords when Earth joined the Union. Any ship capable of rendering aid must respond. Most species interpret capable pretty loosely when it comes to dangerous situations," Dmitry pointed out. "There's probably a dozen ships that heard this signal and kept flying." Raina closed her eyes. She thought about the numbers, the cost, the danger, the angry calls she'd received from corporate headquarters, the potential end of her career. Then she thought about those voices on the distress call, the universal sound of fear, the way the alarm seemed to count down to nothing. "Dmitry, start modifying the shields for radiation resistance. Strip power from non-essential systems." She opened her eyes and met each crew member's gaze. "Hassan, break out the emergency equipment and run drills. Yuki, keep working on that translation and send our own beacon back. Let them know help is coming." "You're sure about this?" Dmitry asked, though he was already heading toward the engine room. "No, Raina admitted. But I'm not leaving someone to die in the dark just because it's dangerous. That's not what humans do. Yuki's console beeped and she gasped. Captain, I got a partial translation. The species identifies themselves as Quinn. They're saying they didn't think anyone would come. Most species won't risk it. They're saying goodbye to their families. Something cold settled in Raina's chest. These aliens had sent a distress call without any real hope of rescue. They were following protocol even though they believed they'd been abandoned. Change that message, Yuki. Tell them humans don't abandon people. Tell them we're coming. What should I say when they ask why we'd risk it? Yuki's hands hovered over her console. Raina turned back to the navigation controls and began plotting their course into the Crimson Nebula. The red cloud filled her screen, violent and deadly and unavoidable. Tell them we're from a Deathworld, she said quietly. Tell them dangerous is what we do best. Radiation alarm screamed as the horizon's edge crossed into the Crimson Nebula. The view screen turned red, then orange, then filled with swirling clouds of superheated gas that looked more like fire than space. Raina's hand stayed steady on the controls, but sweat dripped down her back. Hull temperature rising, Dimitri called out from engineering. His voice crackled through the intercom, barely audible over the sound of straining machinery. She's holding, but I'm routing coolant to the forward sections. We're going to cook back here. How long can we last? Raina asked. In this soup? Maybe 12 hours before the hull starts breaking down. Less if we hit a radiation pocket. 12 hours. They needed 8 to reach the distress signal and however long it took to perform the rescue. The math didn't work. It never did when humans decided to do something stupid. Yuki gripped her console as the ship shuddered. I'm getting feedback on all frequencies. The interference in here is insane. How does anyone navigate through this? They don't, Hassan said. He'd strapped himself into the security station, his jaw tight. That's why it's marked as a hazard zone. Smart species avoid it. Good thing we're dumb. Dimitri's voice came through again, followed by the sound of a hammer striking metal. Captain, I'm reinforcing the starboard hull. We've got microfractures forming. Dr. Lin entered the bridge, medical bag in hand. The ship's doctor looked calm, but then again, Lin always looked calm. That's what made her good at her job. I've prepared the medical bay for multiple casualties. Unknown alien biology. Do we know anything about their physiology? Negative, Yuki said, still trying to clear the static from her communications. I'm getting fragments of their signal, but it's breaking up. Wait. Got something. They're herbivores. Low-gravity world. No predators in their evolutionary history. So they're fragile, Hassan said. Compared to us, everything is fragile. Lin checked her medical scanner. How much radiation are we absorbing? Dimitri's laugh came through the speakers, slightly unhinged. Enough to make any sane species turn back, but we're reading within human tolerance, barely. The ship bucked hard to the left and Raina fought the controls. A massive debris field had appeared on the sensors, chunks of metal and rock tumbling through the radioactive fog. She guided them through gaps that would have been impossible to see without computer assistance, and even then, she was flying half on instinct. There, Yuki pointed at the tactical display. I've got the Quinn ship on sensors. 2 kilometers ahead, but Captain, there's something else. 3 more ships, smaller, and they're not broadcasting any identification. Raiders, Hassan said immediately. He was already unbuckling, heading for the armory. They're probably the ones who attacked in the first place. They stayed to loot the wreck. Raina zoomed in on the sensor data. The 3 unknown ships were circling the disabled Quinn vessel like sharks around bleeding prey. They were clearly military grade, heavily armed compared to her unarmed cargo hauler. Can they see us? She asked. Not yet, Yuki said. The interference works both ways. We're practically invisible in this mess. Then we use that. Raina killed their running lights and reduced their engine signature to minimum. The ship went dark and quiet, a ghost drifting through the radioactive storm. Dimitri, I need you to reroute everything to shields and life support. Make us as small as possible on sensors. Way ahead of you, boss. We're running silent. The horizon's edge crept forward through the crimson clouds. On the view screen, the Quinn ship finally came into view. It was beautiful in a way that human ships never were. Smooth curves and elegant lines like someone had grown it instead of building it. But half of it was torn open, exposing interior chambers to the void. Bodies floated in the debris field around it, small forms in delicate environment suits. Oh no, Yuki whispered. There are so many. Lin stood and moved toward the airlock. Hassan, I need you to organize a recovery team. Anyone still alive in those suits needs immediate medical attention. One of the raider ships broke formation and moved toward the wreck's far side. Through the static, Yuki picked up fragments of their communication. The language was harsh, full of clicking sounds and aggressive tones. "I'm translating," she said, her voice tight. "They're Kral mercenaries, they're saying they took prisoners. 8 Quinn are alive on their command ship." Reyna's hands tightened on the controls. The tactical situation was clear. The Quinn ship was dying, leaking atmosphere and radiation. Anyone still aboard had maybe an hour left. But 8 prisoners on a raider ship meant a rescue operation against armed hostiles. "We can't fight 3 military ships," Dmitri said, stating the obvious. "We've got a welding torch and some harsh language." "We've got mining explosives," Hassan said quietly. He'd returned to the bridge wearing a vacuum suit and carrying several equipment cases, 5,000 kilograms of industrial charges. "We were supposed to deliver them to the mining colony." Reyna looked at him. "Are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting?" "Cargo containers can separate from the main hull. We approach under the cover of this interference, release containers on a trajectory toward the raider ships, and detonate remotely." Hassan pulled up a tactical overlay. "It won't destroy them, but it'll scatter them. Maybe damage them enough to make them retreat." "That's insane," Yuki said. "That's human," Dmitri corrected. Dr. Lin checked her medical equipment one more time. "Whatever we're doing, we need to do it fast. Anyone still alive on that Quinn ship is dying." Reyna studied the tactical display. 3 raider ships, 1 dying Quinn vessel, 8 prisoners, and her small cargo hauler with a crew that should have kept flying. The smart move was to call for help. Wait for proper military ships, follow protocol, and let the proper authorities handle it. But those authorities were hours or days away, and the Quinn didn't have hours. "Dmitri, prep the mining charges for remote detonation. Hassan, load them into containers 3, 7, and 12. Make it look like we're just dumping cargo due to engine trouble." Reyna brought up the helm controls. "Yuki, prepare a wide-spectrum distress signal. Make it look like we're having critical failures." "We are having critical failures," Dmitri pointed out. "Then it'll sound authentic. Lin, prepare for mass casualties." Reyna took a breath. "Everyone understand? We're going to fly a cargo hauler into a combat situation, use mining explosives as weapons, and try to rescue aliens we've never met from an environment that's actively killing us." "Sounds like Tuesday," Hassan said. "Sounds like suicide," Yuki whispered. "Sounds like we don't have a choice." Reyna engaged the engines, guiding them deeper into the radiation storm. The Kral raiders grew larger on her screen, their weapons clearly visible even through the interference. Somewhere in the crimson fog ahead, 8 aliens waited for a rescue they probably thought would never come. Behind them, dozens more bodies floated in the wreckage of their beautiful ship. Reyna thought about turning back, about making the safe choice, about living to haul cargo another day. Then she thought about those voices on the distress call, saying goodbye to their families because they didn't believe anyone would risk saving them. "Let's show them what Deathworlders do," she said, and pushed the engines to full power. Hassan's boots magnetized to the hull of the dying Quinn ship with a metallic clunk that vibrated through his suit. Behind him, Dr. Lin and Dmitri followed, their safety lines glowing in the radioactive haze. The surface beneath his feet felt wrong, too smooth and organic, like touching something that had been alive once. "Life support readings are critical," Lin said, her scanner painting holographic data across her helmet display. "Oxygen at 18%. Temperature dropping. Multiple hull breaches across sections 4 through 9. "How long?" Hassan asked, moving toward the nearest airlock. 1 hour, maybe 90 minutes if they're in the reinforced sections. Dmitri examined the airlock mechanism with his engineering scanner. "This is beautiful work. Everything curves and flows. No hard edges anywhere." He pulled out a plasma torch. "Shame I have to cut through it." "Make it fast," Hassan said. His weapon stayed holstered. They weren't here to fight. Not yet. The torch burned through the alien metal, and Hassan could see the craftsmanship even as it melted away. Whoever built this ship had never considered it might need to withstand violence. Why would they? The Quinn came from a world without predators. They'd never learned to build walls or weapons. The airlock gave way, and Hassan pulled it open manually. Inside, emergency lighting flickered red. The corridors beyond were empty, scattered with debris and personal belongings that floated in the zero gravity. He saw what looked like photographs or maybe paintings, Images of aliens with large eyes and gentle features. Families smiling in gardens full of impossible colors. Movement ahead, Dimitri said. 20 meters. Multiple life signs. They moved forward, pulling themselves through the corridor. The damage was worse inside. Blast marks scarred the walls. Some doors had been forced open with crude tools. The raiders had been through here, taking what they wanted and destroying what they didn't. Hassan heard them before he saw them. Soft sounds like crying, but in a register that made his teeth ache. He rounded a corner and found them huddled in what looked like a cargo bay. 23 Quinn pressed together in the center of the room. Their bodies small and delicate inside environment suits that seemed too fragile to exist. They looked like someone had crossed a deer with a person, and then drained all the aggression out. Large eyes dominated their faces, dark and reflective. Their hands had 4 fingers, long and delicate. They stood maybe 1.5 meters tall, and Hassan was absolutely certain he could break any of them just by shaking their hand too hard. "Don't move fast," Lynn warned. "They're terrified." One of the Quinn stepped forward holding some kind of medical scanner. The alien suit was marked with symbols that probably meant doctor. The Quinn spoke, voice high and musical even through the suit speakers. Yuki's translation came through Hassan's helmet comm. "He says his name is Trell. He's their medical officer. He's asking if we're really here or if he's hallucinating from oxygen deprivation." "Tell him we're real," Hassan said. "Tell him we're here to help." There was a pause while Yuki transmitted. Then Trell made a sound that the translator couldn't interpret, but Hassan understood anyway. It was the sound of someone who had given up hope suddenly finding it again. Trell spoke rapidly, gesturing at the other Quinn. The translator worked overtime. "He says most of them are injured. They have fractures, respiratory damage from the radiation, and one has internal bleeding. He says their ship was attacked by Kral raiders 6 hours ago. The Kral killed 12 of their crew and took 8 prisoners." Another Quinn pushed forward, slightly taller than the others, with more elaborate markings on their suit. "Captain Mora," the translator said. "She's asking why we came. She says they didn't expect anyone to answer. Most species won't enter the Crimson Nebula. It's too dangerous. She says they were saying goodbye to their families." Hassan felt something twist in his chest. They'd been dying here, sending goodbyes into the void because they'd learned that the galaxy was full of species too practical to risk themselves for strangers. "Tell them humans are stupid," he said. "Tell them we don't leave people to die." Dimitri had moved to the wall panels, assessing the damage. "Life support is failing faster than we thought. We've got maybe 40 minutes before this section loses integrity completely. Then we move them now." Hassan looked at the group of aliens. Some could barely stand. Others were being supported by their companions. And there was a young one, barely as tall as Hassan's waist, with eyes that seemed to take up half its face. "We need stretchers," Lynn said, "and careful handling. Their bones are light, adapted for low gravity. I could accidentally crush their ribs just moving them wrong. I'll rig something." Dimitri was already pulling equipment from his pack, using cargo netting and support beams to create makeshift stretchers. Hassan knelt down to the young Quinn's level. The child flinched back, and Hassan understood. Humans were big and dense and came from a world that had tried to kill them every day. They probably looked like monsters. He held out his hand slowly, palm up, the universal gesture of peace. The young Quinn stared at him with those enormous eyes. Then slowly, it reached out and touched his gloved hand with delicate fingers. "Yuki," Hassan said quietly, "tell them about Earth. Tell them where we come from." The translator worked, and Hassan watched the Quinn's reactions as they learned about humanity's homeworld. He saw their eyes widen when they heard about Earth's gravity, nearly twice what they considered normal. Saw them recoil when they learned about predators, about animals that evolved to hunt and kill. Saw their confusion when they heard about wars and weapons and thousands of years of humans fighting each other. Captain Mora spoke, her voice shaking. "She's asking why we'd help them," Yuki translated. "If we come from such a violent world, if we're so dangerous, why would we risk ourselves for strangers?" Hassan looked at the young Quinn still holding his hand. Looked at Trell trying to tend wounds with failing equipment. Looked at all of them, fragile and terrified and waiting to die in the dark. "Tell her it's because we're from a violent world that we help," he said. "Tell her we know what it's like to be afraid. We know what it's like when nobody comes. We decided a long time ago that we'd be the ones who answer the call." Trell spoke again, his voice full of something the translator marked as wonder. He's asking about the 8 prisoners, Yuki said. He wants to know if we're really going after them. If we're really going to fight the Kraul. Yes, Hassan said simply. He says that's insane. The Kraul are warriors. They have weapons and armor and combat training. He says the Quinn don't even have a word for war anymore. They haven't fought in 3,000 years. He says we'll die. Probably, Hassan agreed. He began helping Dimitri load the injured Quinn onto the makeshift stretchers. But that's what Deathworlders do. We do the insane thing. We fight when we shouldn't. We survive when we can't, and we don't leave people behind. The young Quinn tugged on his hand, and Hassan looked down. The child spoke, voice barely a whisper. Yuki's translation came through softly. She says thank you. She says she wants to be brave like the humans someday. Hassan felt his throat tighten. These people had never hurt anyone, had never even conceived of hurting anyone, and the galaxy had taught them that kindness was weakness, that being peaceful meant being prey. We'll get you out, he promised. All of you. And then we're getting your people back. Lin finished scanning the last of the injured. We need to move now. This section has 15 minutes left, tops. The evacuation began, humans guiding Quinn through the dying ship. Hassan took one last look at the cargo bay, at the photographs still floating in the zero gravity. Pictures of a gentle world, a peaceful people, a species that had never learned to fear because they'd never needed to, until they met the galaxy. Come on, he said softly to the young Quinn. Let's go home. Reyna watched through the viewport as the last of the Quinn survivors floated across the gap between ships, guided by safety lines and human hands. 23 fragile aliens crammed into a cargo hauler designed for equipment, not passengers. Dr. Lin was already moving among them, her face tight with concentration as she tried to treat injuries in bodies she'd never seen before. All aboard. Hassan's voice came through the comm. Sealing the airlock now. Status on the raiders? Reyna asked Yuki, still circling. Still haven't detected us through the interference. Yuki pulled up the tactical display. But Captain, their command ship is moving. Looks like they're preparing to leave. With the prisoners still aboard, Dimitri added. He'd return to engineering, and the sound of welding filled the background of his transmission. If they jump to hyperspace, we'll never find them. Reyna studied the display. 3 Kraul ships, military grade, bristling with weapons. Her unarmed cargo hauler with its improvised explosives and crew of 7. The smart tactical analysis gave her odds of exactly 0% success. She smiled. Humans had never been good at accepting bad odds. Dimitri, status on our packages? 3 cargo containers loaded with mining charges, set for remote detonation. They're programmed to look like we're dumping cargo due to engine failure. His voice turned grim. Captain, even if this works, those explosions will light us up on every sensor for 100 kilometers. They'll see us. Then we better make it count. Hassan, get ready for a boarding action. Silence on the comm. Then Hassan's careful voice. Boarding. A Kraul military vessel. With what army? With you and whoever else volunteers, Reyna said. I'm not ordering anyone into a suicide mission. We're already in a suicide mission, Hassan pointed out. This just makes it official. In the cargo bay, Captain Mora pulled herself to the intercom panel. The Quinn's voice came through, high and musical, even through the strain. Yuki translated. She's saying we should leave. Save ourselves and the survivors. She says the 8 prisoners would understand. They wouldn't want anyone else to die for them. Tell her humans are terrible at following sensible advice, Reyna said. She began plotting an intercept course. Tell her we didn't come all this way to leave people behind. Trell spoke next, his words tumbling over each other in rapid succession. He's explaining human biology to the others, Yuki said, and Reyna could hear the amazement in the translator's voice. He's telling them about bone density and muscle mass and healing factors. He's saying humans are built like predators because they evolved from apex hunters. He's saying we're not fragile like them. We're built to survive things that should kill us. Is that supposed to be comforting? Dimitri asked. To them? Maybe. They're starting to understand why we'd try something this insane. Reyna released the first cargo container. It tumbled away from the horizon's edge, spinning slowly through the radioactive haze. Just another piece of debris in a nebula full of wreckage. She counted to 30, then released the second. Then the third. Packages away. She said quietly, "Beginning approach run." The cargo hauler accelerated through the crimson clouds, moving faster than any civilian ship should. Reyna guided them through gaps in the debris field, using every trick she'd learned in 20 years of flying. Behind them, the 3 cargo containers drifted on their programmed courses, closing on the crawl ships. "They're scanning us," Yuki said. "They've detected our movement. They're hailing us." "Put them through." The view screen filled with a face that made several Quinn in the cargo bay gasp. The Kral looked like evolution had taken every predator instinct and wrapped it in scales and armor. Heavy bone ridges, teeth designed for tearing, eyes that tracked movement with the focus of a born hunter. "Human vessel," the Kral commander growled. The translation software gave his words a contemptuous edge. "I am Warlord Gresh. You are in violation of salvage rights. Withdraw or be destroyed." Reyna kept her face neutral. "This isn't salvage. This is a rescue operation. You attacked a civilian vessel and took prisoners. Release them and we'll leave peacefully." Gresh's laugh was a harsh sound like metal grinding. Peaceful, from a Deathworlder. He leaned forward. "We've heard stories about humans, mammals from a high-gravity world. You think you're dangerous. You think you're warriors." His smile showed far too many teeth. "You're in a cargo ship. We have 3 military vessels. Release the Quinn survivors to us and perhaps we'll let you die quickly." "Counter-proposal," Reyna said. She triggered the detonation sequence. "You release our people and maybe we let you survive." 3 cargo containers exploded simultaneously. 5,000 kilograms of mining charges designed to crack asteroids detonated in perfect formation around the Kral ships. The explosions lit up the crimson nebula like new stars being born. The blast wave hit the nearest Kral vessel and sent it spinning. The second ship's shields flared and collapsed. The third, Gresh's command ship, rocked but held position, its military-grade shielding absorbing most of the impact. "Now!" Reyna shouted. The horizon's edge accelerated through the explosion's wake, using the chaos and interference to mask their approach. Hassan and his team were already in the airlock, wearing heavy vacuum suits and carrying improvised weapons, cutting torches, welding tools, a cargo hook that Hassan had sharpened to a point. "This is insane," one of the cargo handlers said. His name was Price, and he'd volunteered immediately when Hassan asked. "We're boarding a military ship with mining equipment." "The Kral won't expect it," Hassan said, checking his suit seals one last time. "They think we're soft, civilized. They think humans follow rules." "We do follow rules," Price said. "Not when someone takes our people." Hassan opened the airlock. "Not when they think we're too scared to fight back." The horizon's edge slammed into Gresh's ship like a hammer. Magnetic grapples locked the 2 vessels together. Hassan's team burned through the hull, cutting into the Kral ship's side like surgeons opening a patient. "Atmosphere detected," Dimitri said. "You've got air on the other side." Hassan pulled the cut section away and dropped into the Kral ship. He landed in a corridor that was designed for beings taller and heavier than humans. Everything was oversized, built for creatures that measured their strength in tons of bite force and crushing power. The first Kral guard came around the corner, and Hassan understood why the galaxy feared them. 2.5 meters tall, muscles like steel cables under armored scales. A weapon that looked like it could punch holes through starship hulls. The Kral looked at Hassan with contempt, saw a smaller mammal in a bulky vacuum suit, saw prey that had wandered into the predator's den. Hassan moved. The years of military training, the genetic inheritance of a species that had hunted mammoths and survived ice ages, the sheer stubborn refusal to die that characterized every human who'd ever lived, all of it compressed into 3 seconds of violence. He was inside the Kral's guard before the alien could bring its weapon to bear. The sharpened cargo hook punched through the gap in the alien's armor, and Hassan used his entire body weight to drive it deeper. The Kral staggered, surprised that the small mammal could hurt it, and Hassan didn't give it time to recover. He grabbed its weapon as it fell and brought it up to face the next guard. "Prisoners," he said into his comm. "Where?" Yuki was monitoring Kral communications. "Lower deck. Section 7. They're moving them now. They know you're aboard." Hassan ran. Price and the others followed, and they moved through the ship like a plague. More Kral guards appeared, and each one learned the same lesson. Humans weren't just dangerous because of their weapons or technology. They were dangerous because they came from a world that had spent millions of years trying to kill them, and they'd survived by being more stubborn than anything else in existence. They found the prisoners in a holding cell. 8 Quinn pressed together in terror. The cell door was heavy, designed to hold back beings of Kral strength. "Stand back," Dmitri said. He'd caught up with Hassan's team, carrying a plasma torch. He burned through the locking mechanism in 15 seconds. The Quinn stared at them with wide eyes. One spoke, voice shaking. Yuki's translation came through Hassan's helmet. "She's asking if we're real. She's asking if we're really rescuing them." "Yes," Hassan said simply, "but we need to move fast." Alarms wailed throughout the ship. More Kral were coming, and Hassan's team was running out of time. They guided the prisoners back toward their entry point, fighting through guards who couldn't believe that mammals this small could be this dangerous. Price took a hit from a Kral weapon, the blast burning through his suit. He went down hard. Hassan grabbed him, threw him over his shoulder, and kept moving. The other humans closed ranks, protecting the Quinn with their bodies. They reached the hole they'd cut in the hull. The horizon's edge waited on the other side, Raina keeping the ships locked together through sheer force of will. "Move, move, move!" Hassan shouted. The Quinn dove through first, then Price, carried by 2 of the cargo handlers. Hassan was the last through, and he felt a Kral weapon blast sear past his helmet close enough to fog the visor. "We're clear!" he shouted. Raina didn't wait. She fired the emergency separation charges, and the horizon's edge tore away from Gresh's ship like a wounded animal fleeing a predator. Behind them, the Kral command ship tried to give chase, but its systems were still reeling from the explosion. "They're targeting us," Yuki said. "Weapons lock achieved. Then let's show them what a cargo hauler can do." Raina pushed the engines past their safety limits. The ship screamed in protest, but it moved, diving deeper into the Crimson Nebula where no sane species would follow. The Kral didn't follow. They'd learned their lesson about underestimating Deathworlders. Dr. Lin's hands were covered in 3 different colors of blood, none of them red. She worked in the cargo bay that had been converted into an emergency medical center, treating injuries she'd only read about in theoretical xenobiology texts. The Quinn had bones like birds, hollow and light, perfect for their low-gravity homeworld but fragile as glass in standard conditions. "This one has a collapsed lung," she said, though calling it a lung was generous. The Quinn respiratory system had 4 chambers and filtered atmosphere in ways human lungs never could. She was improvising medicine, adapting human techniques to alien biology, and somehow it was working. Trell worked beside her, his delicate hands moving with practiced precision despite his own injuries. He'd refused treatment until every other Quinn had been stabilized. Through Yuki's translation, he'd been teaching Lin about Quinn physiology, 2 doctors from different worlds sharing knowledge in the middle of a crisis. "Your species is remarkable," Trell said, his voice carrying a note of exhausted wonder. "You heal so quickly. Price should be dead from that wound, but his body is already repairing itself." Lin glanced at Price, who sat propped against a bulkhead with a massive burn across his torso. He was conscious in pain but alive. Any Quinn would have died from that hit. "Most species in the galaxy would have. We're hard to kill," she said simply. "Our world made sure of that." Dmitri limped into the cargo bay, his left leg dragging. He'd taken shrapnel during the boarding action, and while it wasn't life-threatening for a human, it would have killed most aliens instantly. He carried a medical scanner and a bottle of the ship's emergency medical alcohol, though whether it was for sterilizing or drinking was unclear. "Hull integrity at 60%, he reported. "Engines are running hot. Life support is struggling with 31 extra people breathing our air." He took a drink from the bottle, confirming its purpose. "We'll make it back to civilized space, but it's going to be close." Raina entered behind him, her face gray with exhaustion. She'd been flying for 18 hours straight, guiding them out of the Crimson Nebula through a route that would have killed any other ship. Her hands shook slightly and Hassan quietly handed her a ration bar. "Eat," he ordered. "You're no good to anyone if you collapse." "Yes, sir," she said with a weak smile. Hassan had been military, but right now Raina was the one who looked like a soldier coming back from war. Captain Mora approached them, moving carefully in the higher gravity. Each step looked like it took effort, like she was carrying extra weight. Because she was, Earth standard gravity was nearly twice what she was built for. "Captain Cole," Mora said through the translator, "I need to speak with you." "Of course." Raina set down the ration bar. "What is it?" "The Galactic Union is hailing us," Yuki called from the bridge. "It's Counselor Ven. He sounds angry." Raina closed her eyes briefly. "Put him through." The view screen flickered to life, showing an alien that looked like someone had crossed an octopus with a philosopher. Counselor Ven's multiple eyes focused on Raina with an expression that transcended species barriers. He was furious. "Captain Cole," Ven's voice was cold. "You have violated 17 separate Galactic Union regulations. You entered a restricted zone without authorization. You engaged in military action without diplomatic clearance. You used improvised explosives in a civilian vessel. You boarded another ship without consent. Do you understand the severity of these violations?" "I understand that 31 people are alive who wouldn't be otherwise," Raina said evenly. "That is not the point." "The Union has rules for a reason. We have procedures for rescue operations. We have trained military personnel for situations like this. You are a cargo captain, not a soldier." "Your trained military personnel were hours away," Hassan interjected. "The Quinn didn't have hours." Ben's eyes shifted to Hassan. "And you are the one who led the boarding action. Former military, if our records are correct. You should know better than anyone why we have rules of engagement." "I do know," Hassan said quietly. "I also know when to break them. The Kral Confederacy has filed a formal complaint. They claim you attacked their ships without provocation. They're calling it piracy. They attacked a civilian vessel and took prisoners," Raina said, her voice hardening. "That's piracy. We were conducting a rescue operation. Without authorization. Without proper military support. You could have triggered an interstellar incident." Ven's tentacles writhed with agitation. "The Union will have to impose sanctions. Your ship will be impounded. You and your crew will face tribunal. The fines alone will bankrupt your company." Captain Mora stepped forward into the view screen's view. "Counselor Ven, I wish to speak." Ven's eyes softened slightly. "Captain Mora, I am relieved to see you alive. However, this does not change the fact that—" "Counselor," Mora interrupted, which from a Quinn was apparently shocking. "I wish to provide testimony. The humans saved us, all of us. They flew into a nebula that would have destroyed most ships. They used themselves as shields to protect my people. 3 of them are seriously injured from defending us." Her voice strengthened. "You say they violated regulations. I say they followed a higher law. The law that says you don't let people die in the dark." Trell joined her, his medical scanner still in his hands. "I am Physician Trell. I have examined the humans. Do you know what I found? Radiation damage that would have killed any of us within hours. Burns, fractures, lacerations. They absorbed this damage while saving us. Their bodies are built to survive what kills other species." He looked at Ven directly. "You call them Deathworlders like it's a warning. I call them saviors." The young Quinn, whose name was Pella, pushed forward. She was small enough that she could stand on a crate to reach the view screen. "The humans told me I could be brave like them someday. I want to be brave like them. I don't want to be the species that talks about rules while people die." Ven was silent for a long moment. His tentacles had stopped writhing, lying still in what might have been contemplation or might have been resignation. "The Kral have also issued another statement," he said finally. "They have added humans to their list of species to avoid engaging. They marked you as dangerously unpredictable and tactically irrational. We prefer creatively stubborn." Dimitri called from the back. "This is not a joke," Ven said, but his voice had lost some of its edge. "The Union will still require an investigation. You will still face questions, but—" He paused. "Captain Mora's testimony will be taken into account, as will the testimony of all 31 Quinn survivors, and the fact that you accomplished a rescue that our own military deemed impossible." "Are we still facing sanctions?" Raina asked. "That will be determined by the tribunal. However, I suspect the court of public opinion may complicate matters." Ven's eyes did something that might have been the equivalent of a sigh. The Quinn are already spreading the story. Other species are hearing about it. Some are calling you reckless. Others are calling you heroes. We're not heroes, Hassan said quietly. We're just people who couldn't leave someone to die. That, Ven said slowly, may be what makes you heroes to species who learn to calculate the cost of caring. The transmission ended. Reyna slumped against the bulkhead, suddenly aware of every bruise, every strained muscle, every hour of stress compressed into a body that was reaching its limits even by human standards. Captain, Yuki said softly, we're getting messages. Lots of messages. Other ships are hearing about what we did. Some are offering support. Some are calling us insane. What do you think? Reyna asked. Yuki smiled. I think we're going to have trouble with insurance rates. But I also think we changed something. We showed the galaxy that someone will answer the distress calls they ignore. Dr. Lin finished bandaging Pella's arm, the young Quinn having suffered a minor fracture during the rescue. There, she said gently. You'll be fine. Pella looked up at her with those enormous eyes. When I grow up, I want to be a rescuer like you. I want to help people who are afraid. Lin felt something catch in her throat. Then you will be. The galaxy needs more people like that. Outside the viewport, the crimson nebula faded behind them, replaced by the normal darkness of space. Reyna looked at her crew, battered and exhausted. Looked at the Quinn survivors, slowly beginning to believe they might actually be safe. Looked at the damage reports scrolling across her screen, each one representing a cost they'd chosen to pay. Worth it? Hassan asked quietly. Reyna thought about Pella wanting to be brave. Thought about Trell calling them saviors. Thought about 31 people breathing because they'd refused to be practical. Every credit, she said. Every scar. Every regulation we broke. Worth it. Good, Hassan said. Because there's another distress call coming in. Long range. Yuki's picking it up now. Reyna closed her eyes. Of course there was. The galaxy was full of people in danger, and now they knew that at least one crew of humans was crazy enough to answer. Plot a course, she said. Let's go be Deathworlders again. 6 months had passed since the Crimson Nebula rescue, and the galaxy had not stopped talking about it. Ambassador Patel stood before the Galactic Union Assembly, a chamber so vast it required translation for sound to reach all corners. Thousands of species watched from their seats, their forms ranging from crystalline beings that communicated through light to massive creatures that existed partially in other dimensions. The motion before us, Counselor Ven announced, is the formal classification of humanity as high-risk responders. This designation would acknowledge their unique approach to emergency situations and establish protocols for their involvement in future incidents. Patel had prepared for this moment. She wore her diplomatic uniform, but she'd chosen to add one detail, a small pin showing the horizon's edge, the cargo ship that had become famous across 100 worlds. Honorable delegates, she began. Let me tell you what high-risk responder really means. It means we go where others won't. It means we try when others have calculated the odds and walked away. It means we refuse to let practicality become an excuse for cowardice. A delegate from the Torvin Collective, a species known for their mathematical precision, spoke up. Ambassador Patel, we are not cowards. We are rational. We calculate risk versus reward. We preserve resources for situations where success is probable. And while you calculate, Patel said quietly, people die, not because rescue is impossible, but because it's inconvenient. Because it might damage your ships. Because your insurance won't cover it. Because the paperwork is complicated. She pulled up a holographic display, and Captain Reyna Cole appeared in the center of the chamber, larger than life. The image was from the rescue, her face exhausted but determined as she guided the horizon's edge through the Crimson Nebula. This is Captain Cole. She's not military. She's not a diplomat. She hauls mining equipment for a living. Patel let that sink in. She risked her life, her ship, her career, and the lives of her crew to save people she'd never met. People from a species she'd only read about in reports. Another image appeared. Hassan carrying Price through the crawl ship, both humans wounded but still moving forward. This is Officer Hassan and cargo handler Price. They boarded a military vessel with improvised weapons. Price nearly died. Hassan took 3 direct hits from crawl weapons. They succeeded anyway. More images cycled through. Dr. Lin treating Quinn patients with biology she'd never studied. Dmitri holding the ship together through conditions that should have torn it apart. Yuki translating between species who'd never spoken before. You call us Deathworlders, Patel said, and her voice echoed through the vast chamber. You use that term like it's a warning. A label for species too dangerous, too reckless, too stubborn to follow proper procedures. She paused. You're right. We are all of those things. But we're also the ones who answer when you call for help. We're the ones who go into the dark places. We're the ones who refuse to calculate whether a life is worth saving. The Quinn delegation stood as one. Captain Mora stepped forward, her movements more confident now after months of physical therapy to adjust to higher gravity environments. The humans saved us, she said simply. Not just our bodies, but our understanding of what's possible. We were a species that had forgotten how to be brave. We'd learned that the galaxy was full of rules and calculations, and somewhere in all that math, we'd lost sight of what matters. Trell joined her. I've spent 6 months studying human biology and human culture. Do you know what I learned? They come from a world that tried to kill them every day. Predators, diseases, weather that could freeze or burn them, gravity that crushed their bones and made their hearts work twice as hard. He looked around the chamber. They survived all of that, and then they decided to use that strength to help others. That's not dangerous. That's noble. Young Pella was there too, now wearing a small uniform that marked her as a trainee with the Quinn Rescue Service, a new organization that had been formed after the humans' example. I want to be like them, Pella said, her voice small but clear. I want to be someone who helps, not someone who calculates. The chamber filled with sounds, thousands of species all responding at once. Some delegates argued for caution, for regulations, for the careful preservation of resources. Others spoke about moral obligations and the shame of abandoning those in need. Councillor Venn raised a tentacle for silence. The question is not whether humans are capable of rescue operations. Clearly they are. The question is whether we as a union will support or restrict such actions. Admiral Torres appeared on another screen, broadcasting from Earth. The military officer looked every bit the soldier she was, decorated with honors from conflicts most species only studied in history texts. Restrict us if you want, Torres said bluntly. Fine us, sanction us, ban us from your space lanes. We'll still come when someone calls for help. That's who we are. That's who we've always been. She leaned forward. But if you support us instead, think about what we could do together. Think about how many lives we could save. A delegate from the Kral Confederacy spoke, and the chamber went silent. The Kral rarely attended union sessions, preferring to stay in their own territories. The humans are dangerous, the Kral representative said. This is known. We have updated our protocols to avoid engagement with their vessels. However, the delegate paused. We have also noted that attacks on civilian vessels in human-monitored space have decreased by 73%. Pirates and raiders have learned that humans respond to distress calls. They respond with violence if necessary. The trade lanes are safer because of them. More voices joined in. Species that had heard the story. Species that had been inspired by it. Species that had realized they'd been playing it safe for so long, they'd forgotten what it meant to take a risk for something that mattered. I propose an amendment, a delegate from the Sivari Communion said. Instead of restricting human rescue operations, we establish the Galactic Emergency Response Coalition. Humans will lead operations, but other species will provide support, medical aid, and resources. We learn from them. We join them. The debate continued for hours. Some species wanted strict oversight. Others wanted humans given complete freedom. A few still argued that the whole thing was too dangerous, too unpredictable, too likely to cause problems. In the end, the vote came down. The high-risk responder classification passed, but with additions. Humans would be authorized for emergency response operations. Other species could volunteer to join them. Resources would be allocated. Training programs would be established. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't everything. But it was a start. Patel closed her presentation with one final image. The Horizon's edge in dock being repaired after its ordeal. Dozens of species working on it together, each contributing their unique skills and knowledge. Quinn engineers worked alongside human mechanics. Torvin mathematicians calculated optimal repair sequences with Dmitri, who ignored half their suggestions and made it work anyway. This is what we're building, Patel said. Not just a rescue service, a reminder that the galaxy is full of people who need help, and that help is worth the risk. The session ended. The delegates dispersed. And across the galaxy, species began signing up for the new coalition. Some were warriors looking for purpose. Some were scientists wanting to contribute. Some were ordinary people who'd heard the story and decided they wanted to be brave like the humans. Meanwhile, the Horizon's Edge received another distress call, but this time they weren't alone. 3 Quinn ships appeared on the scanners, their elegant forms modified with reinforced hulls and emergency equipment. A Torvin mathematical analysis vessel joined them, ready to calculate optimal rescue approaches. A Savari medical ship hung in formation, its doctors eager to learn from Dr. Lin. "Well," Reyna said, looking at the expanding fleet, "this is new." "You started something," Hassan observed. He was back at his security station. His wounds healed, but the memories still fresh. "You showed them it could be done." "We showed them," Reyna corrected. "All of us." Yuki pulled up the distress call. "It's coming from the Broken Coast region. Another civilian vessel in trouble. Looks like engine failure in a meteor field." "Casualties?" Reyna asked, unknown. "But they're requesting immediate assistance." Dimitri's voice came through from engineering. "The ship's ready, probably. It should hold together. We've got better equipment now thanks to the Union funding, but I still don't trust any of it." "That's why we keep you around," Reyna said with a smile. "Your paranoia has saved us more than once." Dr. Lin appeared on the bridge, her medical bay fully stocked with supplies for 17 different species. "Ready when you are, Captain. Fleet status?" Reyna asked. "The Quinn ships are ready. Captain Mora says they're eager to help." Yuki smiled. "The Torvin vessel reports all systems optimal. The Sivari are standing by." Reyna looked at the fleet assembled around her battered cargo hauler. 6 months ago, she'd flown into the Crimson Nebula alone, gambling everything on a rescue that seemed impossible. Now she had ships from 4 different species ready to follow her into danger. "All vessels, this is Captain Cole of the Horizon's Edge," she broadcast on the fleet channel. "We have a ship in distress. We have people who need help. So let's go do what we do best. Let's go save some lives." The fleet moved as one, jumping toward the Broken Coast. In the cargo bay, Pella practiced the emergency procedures she'd learned from Hassan. In the Quinn medical ship, Trell prepared supplies using techniques Lin had taught him. On the Torvin vessel, mathematicians worked with Dimitri's improvised engineering solutions, learning that sometimes the best answer wasn't the most elegant one. The galaxy was changing slowly, imperfectly, but definitely, because a cargo ship captain had decided that some things were worth the risk. Because a crew of humans had shown that Deathworld instincts could be used for protection instead of destruction. Because species that had learned to play it safe had been reminded that bravery was a choice anyone could make. The distress call grew stronger as they approached. Somewhere ahead, people were afraid, calling out into the darkness hoping someone would answer. And for the first time in galactic history, they could be certain someone would, not because it was safe, not because it was profitable, not because the regulations required it, but because it was right. Because they were Deathworlders, and that's what Deathworlders did.